Man.
All right, so here we are again, episode 3 of Spoken Freely, and today I am joined by Joe Buettner, the sports editor of the Norman Transcript, who is joining us from his home, and as he was telling me offline, kind of has the option to do a lot of stuff socially distant, and Joe, that's got to be kind of nice sometimes.
Yeah, I'm pretty used to it, just from like some of the previous jobs I've had. So like the work from home life was not a huge adjustment for me whatsoever. But yeah, it's been nice, kind of the past few months, just to kind of just get to do this and kind of work from home. And there's really not anywhere to go to as far as in-person press conferences or really games. I help with the high school side of things still, and so that's been the one area where I have to like get dressed and like go out to a high school football practice. So that's about the extent of like me going out and doing work outside of the home, but in the office a little bit. But it has been kind of nice to just kind of wake up and just go to the office or go to the desk and just start working.
And this whole pandemic thing has not been easy on anybody, but definitely, one thing that I've tried to tell myself is, a lot of other people have had it worse than I have. I had a job through the whole thing, and speaking of people who, had it pretty crazy for a few months, you've had quite the summer, and starting off the summer as an OU writer for the Norman Transcript, and going through furlough, and then being brought back on as sports editor. And then not on top of that, you were engaged trying to plan a wedding. And, and I understand that you and your fiance eventually pushed the date back, but, talk about how the kind of range of emotions that you've gone through this year.
It's a lot, man. It wasn't what we were expecting for 2020, that's for sure. But I mean, it's been good. I mean, furlough, like you said, it's been worse, I think, for a lot of other people. And that's a good thing to keep in perspective. And for me, that's how I looked at it. Even though I was out of work for about a month, it's still, I could have been in a much worse situation. And so I just like, it was hard for me to, not feel too bad about myself, just because I know there's so many people that are struggling through this really, hard economic time. And so that was, it was tough being away from writing. But I was very optimistic that it would be there for me, come when football returned, and knowing that the state that we're both in, football is such a big deal.
Yeah.
I presumed that, the Big 12, OU, the high schools, they would do everything they possibly could to make this football season happen. So I felt good about that. And then as for the engagement, me and my fiance, not quite what we planned, but just we have so many people traveling in. And there's been some people that we've seen have weddings, and like we're invited to some weddings that are still going on even before ours. And that, a lot of what our decision went into was just like we have so many people traveling in. Because my fiance isn't from Oklahoma, and so that was the biggest reason. Is just too many people flying, and I don't know if you've flown since the pandemic started, but it's something we're not quite ready to do yet. Just it just seems like an avoidable risk, if you know what I mean.
Right. No, absolutely. I was a friend of mine was supposed to get married, I think in New Jersey at some point this year, and they pushed it back and said, you know what, we probably don't need to do this in 2020, and we'll just focus on trying to buy a house. And yeah, it's been wild. And like you said, the field we're in, football's such a big deal, and that was the question that I've been asked 100 times over this fall, or this summer rather. Are we going to have football in the fall? High school, college especially. And we got a little bit of answer to that this past week. I was actually covering a high school volleyball game and got a message on my phone that said the Big 12 does plan to go ahead and play in the fall. Meanwhile, of course, the Big Ten and Pac-12 have said that they are not going to do it in the fall. This whole thing, I feel like we can talk about it ad nauseum, but so many things can change day to day that it's really hard to give a definitive answer, because they might decide to play right now, but we have no idea if things will change going forward. And I know, you are as close to the program as a lot of other people. What have you heard from OU, or how close are you able to be to the program? Do you think that this trying to play in the fall thing will work? And if so, for how long?
I worry about the long-term sustainability of it. And that's not to say, and I feel like I should probably preface, because I feel like there's a big faction of people on social media that think that us sports writers are rooting against the season, which by no means I'm not. I'm not rooting against the season. It's my livelihood. It keeps the lights on. So I very much appreciate football being around. But I think there are serious worries that people should take into consideration as far as we are seeing as college kids come back to campus and classes start, that this is something that's going to be completely different of a beast than what we're seeing with the NBA. I mean, Major League Baseball is barely hanging on because they can't seem to figure out how to do this thing properly because they're traveling around the country. And so that's been kind of disheartening to see how much I think there has been so many college campuses open back up, and you're seeing students. And I don't want to cast judgment on anyone, because I get it. You're 19, you're 20 years old, you've never been away from home, and this is the time of your life. At the same time, I just don't think it's conducive to a pandemic or a football season, or to having one. And so that's been kind of the thing. And as far as being close to the program, I mean, there's really only so much you can do. I was going to say the one thing in person I have done OU related is I went to an Oklahoma Board of Regents meeting, I think a few weeks ago, when they extended Lincoln Riley's contract by 2 years and tacked on a few $1 million to his salary. And so that was the one time I was in person. I spoke with Joe Castiglione, but I mean, we really have been kind of, and this is no slight at OU. I just think that I think that OU is, I don't want to say they've kept us in the dark as far as what's happening. I just don't think anyone knows anything. And that's not to say that, that they don't know what they're doing, but I just literally think that everyone is afraid to say anything because this could change tomorrow. And that's the scary part of this pandemic, is that I feel almost irresponsible planning my weeks ahead of writing, because our usual process is we plan out 2 weeks ahead. So I know what I'm going to do, 2 Mondays from now. But that's just not something you can do in this pandemic, because something is going to happen. It's a scary thing. And so far, the Big 12 is continuing on as normal. And I hope that they do have a season, but with the caveat, I hope that they can do it safely. So that's it's been tough. I'm curious from your end what it's been just like, talking with people. It just seems like we're in such an unprecedented part of this, industry, and it's an unprecedented time for everyone. But I'm curious what your experience has kind of been like.
It has definitely been very, it's been very bizarre in many senses, in that, I mean, I literally texted a coach, and I don't even know if this was COVID related, but I texted a coach recently, a football coach, high school football coach, when his team was going to be practicing the next day, just within 12 hours or 24 hours. I said, what time do you think you guys will be practicing tomorrow? He goes, I don't know yet. And that kind of blew me away. Your first week of practice and you're already, kind of having to shuffle around your schedule. But it's, like you said, it's been very bizarre not really being able to be at a lot of these things. We did a photo shoot for our high school football preview kind of magazine that we're doing, and we shot it at the local football state at Cameron Stadium. And just being out on that field felt very surreal and sent a rush of emotion to me. God, I hope we have this. And, but like you said, we want it to be in a safe manner. Touching on what you said, I could get on my soapbox about social media in general, but the whole idea of, that sports writers somehow are responsible for leagues shutting down, or that we are somehow providing this doom and gloom atmosphere. I'm just trying to, write what I know, which, like you said, we don't know from day to day what is going to happen. And also, yeah, I would be stupid to wish there to not be a football season. It's my favorite sport. B, like you said, it keeps the lights on. And it's just, as a massive college football fan, who no longer has access to NCAA football 14, I don't know what I would do in the fall if there isn't a season. But
it's a good thing you held on to it. I was a few years ago, I was like just not doing well financially. I was like, I got to sell this PS3. I got to sell the NCAA 14. And I got like maybe $2 for that NCAA 14 game. And now it's selling for $100 on eBay.
Yeah. And I'm actually kind of in the opposite ring, where even when I am not financially, super sound, if I'm doing well enough, I have continually, in the past 3 years, I think I have bought 3 PlayStation 3s off of like Facebook Marketplace, and recently got one for a decent price. But I'm afraid that while my old one had the yellow light of death while NCAA 14 was in it, I think that might have messed up the disc. And and a friend of mine who is not always up to date on some of these things, he very generous with his money, I'll use that term. He said, "I'll just buy you a new copy, dude." I was like, I don't think you know what you're saying here. And he looked up and he goes, "Oh, never mind. No, I can't promise you that at all." But yeah, it's one of those things where how this is going to work, I don't really know. As you mentioned, the bubble thing has worked in spurts. The NBA has made it work. But when you consider that's 12 to 14 people on a team versus 100, and B, these are not professional athletes. They, as long as the NCAA is going to keep up this facade that these are student athletes and that they are getting an education, which is more important than money apparently, then there's no way that you can say that they can't be on campus. And as long as that is really, I think, what we're going to see. That's when we're really going to see the true litmus test, is once all these students get on campus, is you can try your best to control 100 kids in one football field, or on one football or one locker room or whatever. When you have however many students OU and OSU have, whatever it's, high 20,000s, I mean, that's a different animal altogether. And I'm not saying that the solution is to go completely digital or to go completely virtual, or to, send them home to their parents. I don't know what that accomplishes, but that is something where I think that you're already seeing OU, who had been kind of a real beacon of hope for a lot of other schools throughout the summer, because however many days or weeks it was that they reported no positive cases. And then all of a sudden they had 9. And then, Oklahoma State having to put one particular sorority in quarantine because after just like bid weekend, they had like 20 people test positive. It's going to be really crazy to see what happens. And if we do have football this fall, I just don't understand how you could possibly have fans or have very many fans.
Yeah, the number came out that their limiting capacity at 25% was, I think, probably a fair estimate to like kind of start off with. You don't want to be the school that says we're doing 50%, you don't want to be the school that like goes way too high. So I think that, OU has such a big home venue that you can probably scatter 20,000 people in that thing. But I still think at the end of the day that's just a lot of people. And the case is, I think it would be one thing is, May, June was, I think I've maybe been to like 2 restaurants since or sat down and ate at a restaurant since March. And like May and June was when like I went out and ate, and like it just felt like things were really good as far as like case numbers. And now it just seems like the complete opposite. I mean, schools were shutting down back in March when there was like, less than 1,000 cases, like by far. The case numbers were like below 100 even. And now we are getting to the point where we're seeing new cases by the thousands on a daily basis, and they're opening back up. So I don't understand the logic. It doesn't seem like there is a whole lot of logic really anywhere across, not even just sports, but just in general. I don't know what we're doing here, but I'm also is probably a little bit biased because I'm a huge proponent. And if any prospective college students are listening, take as many online classes as you can because they are the absolute best. But that's just my personal experience.
Yeah, my experience was not quite that, but then again, my freshman year of college, I think one of my math classes was partly online, and I was my first time away from home for a long, I was 4.5 hours away from home, and I log onto my laptop, first time having my own computer, and I'm like, well, I could do my math homework, or I could get on Facebook. Yeah. I'll let you guess which one won out most of the time, but I do think that if you have that self-control, that online classes can be very beneficial, and you can go at your own pace, and you can get your work done at a certain rate. And I do think that there is a positive aspect to that, but I do think that, like you said, when you were saying what the logic is behind all these places opening, I think really is money, if we're being honest. Is so many of these things, you have to function to a certain point. And while I am all for being as safe as possible, I do kind of understand some of the people that say you can't live in fear and all that. I just wonder, at what cost are we going to do this? Are we just going to kind of say, damn the torpedoes, and just send all these kids to colleges, and whoever gets it, gets it. Whoever, dies. To paraphrase Ivan Drago from the old Rocky movies, if he dies, he dies. But it is, I mentioned this to Jacob Buettner. The people that I worry about are, yes, there are people, around our age groups that it can definitely be life-threatening to if they have, pre-existing conditions. But, it's the people that are older that I think are really going to be affected by this. But it's situations where, like you said, if you have family members coming in, I had, I don't think I've gone and stayed at my parents' place probably since February. And, even when I got to go visit them, they live in Texas. And even when I got to go visit them, they were like, no, I'd really rather you stay somewhere else. And it was just that, or we're not doing hugs right now, or something like that. And granted, that was back, April and May. And now, again, I don't know if it's that things have necessarily gotten better, because I don't think they have. I think it's just that we have gotten tired of it. And, I don't know if that's a good reason to open things up. But again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I'm just a guy who writes about sports. And so, kind of getting back to the football aspect of it, OU, let's say there is a season. Let's say that these cases do, stay at a minimum. Let's say 9 is the most that they have for a while. This is, again, it's not necessarily the same hype that has surrounded OU in the past 5 years, shall we say, because you don't necessarily have the Heisman favorite quarterback or Heisman candidate quarterback. But I think a lot of people are sleeping on Spencer Rattler and that team. What are kind of the expectations going forward for OU?
I think they're probably, if you take away you have a new starting quarterback, you lose a first-round talent in CeeDee Lamb, first-round talent Kenneth Murray, that, the average, I think, OU fan, probably all that aside, just expects OU to win the Big 12 and make it to the playoff. I think that is the precedent that Lincoln Riley has set, because that's all he's done. I think realistically, it's obviously, I don't know if it's easier, but OU's path to the playoff is a lot easier with the Big 10 and Pac-12 not playing. Now, I do think that the Big 12 is a lot tougher than it has been. I think last year, because no disrespect to Jalen Hurts, but he had the impossible task of following up Kyler Murray and really Baker Mayfield. And I didn't think that team. I thought that team really overachieved as far as like it reminded me a lot of OU had just last year had a lot of 50-50 games go their way, and at the end of the day they make it to the college football playoff, and they slip up once against Kansas State, but like it reminds me a lot of like 2014 OU when Trevor Knight was coming off the Sugar Bowl. They go 8-5, but if you remember those losses, other than losing to Baylor by like 30 points in Norman,
right?
That was a team that lost a lot of 50-50 games, and that's a team that maybe is playing in an Alamo Bowl or playing in a Sugar Bowl, whatever it may be. If they don't, lose it on the last minute of TCU, they don't lose on a field goal basically to Kansas State. They don't re-kick the ball to Tyreek Hill. So there's just things that like I thought that overachieved quite a bit with last year's team, and a lot of things went their way. I think this team is better equipped to kind of pick up where we saw with Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. I just, I think the hype surrounding Spencer Rattler, and I think a lot of people obviously probably have some weird perceptions of him just based off of his appearance on the Netflix show QB1, and just kind of his overall bravado that he brought, and just is very, confident in himself, and maybe that's mistaken for cockiness. But I mean, he is one of the top quarterback prospects ever, basically. And I think that him and Lincoln Riley, it's going to be a good marriage. And I think that they've got so much talent that I think that OU can win the Big 12, get to the playoff, and even if the Big 10 and Pac-12 were involved, I think they'd probably be there. But on the other hand of that, I think the Big 12 is probably tougher than it's been in 2 or 3 years, just because Texas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, I think are all legit. I don't know how Dave Aranda is going to do at Baylor, but I mean, I legitimately think there's probably 5 teams that I could see being in AT&T Stadium for the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, about the Big 12 being as strong as it is this year, and I tend to agree with you. And one thing that I noticed, especially when you take away the non-conference schedule for OU, with the one exception, since the Big 12 was granting them, I guess the Missouri State game will be. They set that one. Did they go ahead and set that one for September 12th?
September 12th, looking like it's going to be a pay-per-view game. So
okay.
Scrape together $60 while you can.
Right, and then after that, now I guess the schedule has changed. They did change the schedule around when the Big 12 made that announcement last week, because prior to that, you basically had OU starting their conference schedule with the 4 teams that were picked to finish behind them, going to, I believe you were going to host Baylor. You were going to play, obviously, Texas at the Cotton Bowl. You were going to go to Iowa State and play Oklahoma State. And none of those are gimme games by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, they now have those kind of separated out with games against Kansas State and TCU and Kansas thrown in there. But, I mean, this is do you think at this point, and obviously this question now has also changed since the Big 10 and Pac-12 have gone away. Do you think that to make the college football playoff, OU has to go unbeaten, or do you think that if they if they go 9-1, that can still earn them a win in the Big 12 championship, that they can still earn a trip to the Final Four?
No, I was gonna say I think that I don't think they need to go undefeated necessarily. Having the 2 non-power, like having 2 less Power 5 leagues in the mix, I think is probably more leeway than OU has given itself in years. Because, I mean, 2018, 2019, I think OU probably, I mean, I know last year, I'm trying to think back what the narrative was around the 2018 team, but I mean, 2019, OU needed help. Yep. OU needed Utah to play itself out of the equation. 2017, obviously, was. I'm thinking back to that. I think they were the 2 seed, so I don't think there's any issue. Anyway, all that to say, I think that OU's probably has more leeway than usual. I think that the college football playoff committee will probably take the champion from each ACC, SEC, and Big 12. I don't know who the fourth spot goes to. It could end up being another SEC school, or maybe a group of 5 team finally gets in, which Memphis will be really good this year. I can't really, I guess Boise State's not playing, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
I love a Thursday night game when you get to see the blue field. But
Right.
anyway, yeah, I think they'll be fine as far as like if they drop a inexplicable game to if they lose to Texas Tech or something like that, I think they'll be fine. But I mean, you brought up a really good point though. That schedule that they had that was originally planned, it was a murderer's row in October. Because if OU was going to get through that, their November is probably the easiest it's probably been in a while, because it seems like the Big 12, for whatever reason, is really stacked OU's tough games in November.
Yeah.
And kind of seeing that first part of the schedule be the way, way tougher part, I was really interested to see like what that team looks like if they were to get through that, and then do they just sleepwalk through November? Because I think that would be the ultimate like college football move, is just go 8-0 and then you lose for some reason to like West Virginia or something like that in Morgantown. But anyway.
No, you're right. And just out of curiosity, I was looking 2018, I want to say 2018, I want to say that the big deal was, I think Alabama had to beat, that's right, Georgia was number 4 going into that SEC title game, and Tua gets hurt. They put in Jalen Hurts, and I think that ended up, if Georgia wins that game, who knows if they both make the college football playoff. That might have kept OU out. And then I think Ohio State had one loss that year, but they had gotten the snot kicked out of them, so it really wasn't as big a deal. But OU also, like you said, obviously they've recruited very well, and I think so much has gone into the offense, and for good reasons. I mean, and I wrote a column whenever they signed, or whenever they got the commitment from Caleb Williams, that, okay, well, that's awesome, and I love his game, and I think he'll, much like Spencer Rattler, I think he'll be a perfect fit in that offense. However, until he can play defensive back or linebacker or rush the passer, I don't know how much he helps the team in that regard, because they're going to continue to have great offense as long as Lincoln Riley is there, I feel like. And recently, a couple of commits that, OU, I think, initially appeared to be leaning in on, guys like Kendall Daniels or Marcus Burris, both of whom commit to Texas A&M. I mean, is there any – obviously this is going to be such a weird recruiting period anyways, because nobody can go on actual visits, and we don't know, with a potential spring football with the Big Ten and Pac-12, we don't know what that's going to mean for signing days. We don't know what that's going to mean, with some of these high schools playing spring football possibly. What is the kind of the vibe around OU recruiting? Is it just kind of a wait and see? Or, I mean, I think they're still building a very good class, but is there kind of a sense that Alex Grinch is getting the guys he needs?
I think so. And I think that with Kendall Daniels, I can speak to this a little bit more specifically, just based off of like talking to other people, that, that was a decision that OU really wanted him at linebacker. Kendall Daniels wanted to play safety. It seems like something where, like, if you're OU, like, don't you guys kind of need some safeties?
Yeah.
But I think defensively, though, the one thing, and it feels like such a spin zone for recruiting guys, but, the one thing I keep seeing is that, OU's not really getting 4 or 5 stars. They're not rolling in like Alabama or Clemson. And you're seeing a lot of like 3-star guys. But the one thing I keep hearing is just like OU is not really looking at stars so much as far as, they would love the 4 stars. They would love the 5 stars, but the thing they're really going for is guys that fit their system. Mm-hmm. And I think for probably quite a long time, like OU is, you've kind of seen with certain guys, and I think his career still, is being played out. But like Brendan Radley Hiles, like, I don't know if Alex Grinch recruits him. because he likes kind of taller, longer defensive backs, and Buki's quite the opposite of that. But he could still develop into a good player. But I think when you see some guys that show up that, they might be a 3-star, but if they're like 6'2", 6'3", and have, big wingspans, like, I think Alex Grinch has a certain type of player he likes, but it might not always come in a 4-star, 5-star package. So I think there is still quite a bit of optimism with everything that's going on. But the optics of it don't look good when you have the top, high school recruit in Oklahoma basically say, we'll, pass you up for the third time in 4 years, because you saw it with Josh Proctor going to Ohio State, Dax Hill going to Michigan, and now Kendall Daniels going to Texas A&M. It just doesn't look good from an optics standpoint. But I think the overall feeling is that OU feels good about who they're recruiting. It's just, I think it's going to take some maybe recalibration as far as, who is a guy that fits OU and who fits Alex Grinch's scheme. So,
and then you look at the and one thing that just kind of hit the wire yesterday. Kennedy Brooks, deciding to opt out for this season, and obviously you'd already had Trey Sermon transfer out, and this was kind of, you mentioned the recruiting, and it felt like for a while they were just stockpiling running backs left, right, and center. And to the point where, when they lost out on a guy like Jace McClellan at the last minute, it didn't hurt as bad as I feel like it would have hurt a lot of other schools, because you felt like you still had so many guys there. And obviously bringing in a guy like Seth McGowan still works. But what is the sense that you get in terms of what that running back room now looks like, and who do we think is running back one on the depth chart come the first game of the season?
I think it'll probably be TJ Pledger. He's got the most experience, and I would assume that Lincoln probably gives the guy with the most experience the ball first. I was trying to think back, and I mean, you don't have to think too far back of when the last time OU really had to replace some big-time names in their backfield as far as like running backs go. But like, you move from 2016 of having Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon, and then the next year you're just like, well, is Rodney Anderson gonna show up finally and be a player? And he did that. And they even found Trey Sermon that year, a true freshman. So I don't think it's out of the question that whatever Lincoln Riley can do, that he can maybe turn TJ Pledger into a viable number one option. I think this, obviously the big asterisk is if we play football, if we get a 10-game season, that if these guys get the reps, this could be super beneficial to a guy like Marcus Major, Seth McGowan, as you mentioned. I mean, they're all 4-star guys. And, TJ Pledger, I don't think has really lived up to that quite during his career. But I think the talent and the base is there. And the one thing that's going to really help them is the fact that OU has a really good offensive line coming back. And I'm not a guy that, says that, you can put anyone behind OU's offensive line. I think maybe in 2018, I think that was a very good argument that OU offensive line, you could have put anyone back there and they probably would have rushed for at least, 100 yards. But I think the line's really good this year, and that's going to help these young guys out. But and really more than anything, man, is that, getting those guys reps just is really just going to, I think, set them up so well for the future. I think when the running back position, it really does come down to like physical reps, mental reps. You have to have those if you ever want to be successful. Obviously, there's freaks out there like, Adrian Peterson, who just immediately touch the ball and they're amazing. But you just have to go out there and do it against live action. And I think that's going to be I think this could be a really beneficial year. What that product looks like is going to be or remains to be seen. But I think they'll be fine. It just kind of depends as far as like who else opts out of the season.
Yeah, and as I'm looking at the roster online, I'm realizing like I feel almost silly questioning their, I can sit here and question their running back depth, and yet, a guy like Ramondre Stevenson kind of comes out of nowhere last year and really steps up. So it's like clearly they have a good system there, but like you said, it remains to be seen. And then finally, the last time I was in Norman, actually, and I want to say this might be the only time, one of the only times that you and I like officially met was, and I don't know if you remember this, but I was, it was the Iowa State game, and it was 14-point lead with 5 minutes to go, and I'm leaving the I leave the press box, but I'm kind of behind everybody else who's going down on the field or getting ready to go to the press conference room, and I'm running a little behind, and I go down there and realize that I had not been at that stadium in about 2 years and did not know which way the press conference room was. And I get turned around, get almost onto the other side of the stadium at a certain point, following somebody who I thought was media, and they weren't. And I see you from behind or from a distance, and knowing you through Tyler Palmatier and just from, y'all's podcasts and everything, I just blurred out, "Joe." And I realized, oh, he might not know who I am. But you were very kind and pointed me in the right direction. But, assuming I do get to go cover some OU games this year, and I asked Jacob Unruh about this, what are some restaurant recommendations? Because I am a food boy who loves his good food. And I've been to Norman a few times, but it has been a while since I've had some true Norman native Norman cuisine. I know some of the big spots. What are some of the Joe Buettner stamp of approval places?
Well, there's a lot of different ways you can go with that. I think probably my favorite place, and probably where I'm going to head to after we're done taping this podcast, is Midway Deli, which is a old school mom and pop. It was a grocery store that had a deli counter, and is now just basically a sandwich shop. They actually, if you the way that the parking is set up at OU for home football games is where they give us our parking passes, or at least mine. I have to walk through kind of the fan fest on the north side of campus, and Midway has a food truck, and I always think man, it sounds really good right now, but I know they're probably gonna OU has always done a good job of providing media meals and providing drinks throughout the game and stuff like that. So, but Midway Deli, big fan, can't go wrong. It's kind of tucked away into one of the Norman neighborhoods, but it's well worth it. And then as far as I feel like something that probably as far as just gets you in the mood for football, especially in this part of the country, is barbecue. Ray's Barbecue on Lindsay Street is my favorite in Norman, and I think that's pretty much everyone's favorite in Norman. But they do an excellent job. And then, but on the other kind of side of town, my favorite Mexican spot is Tara Hamara's, which I tend to as far as Mexican food, if I know I'm doing something after, it's not something I go for usually, because Tara, it's just it's super carb heavy, and I'm just I'm gonna fall asleep. It's definitely a post game thing, especially if you have an 11 a.m. kickoff, and you want to catch a few margs and have some really good tacos. So those are probably the three I would recommend. And then for drinks, the library is kind of my spot.
I've heard of it, yes, because I heard that.
I feel like every town has a bar called the library,
right?
But
yeah,
it's my favorite in Norman. So
nice. Yeah, I can kind of relate to what you were saying in terms of the Midway Deli. Was that the one? I'm trying to think. Was Midway the one that Tyler, where Barry Switzer hangs out at? Yeah.
That's it. If you can, honestly, man, if you just show up, you'll probably see Barry Switzer. But yeah, Tyler wrote a long form feature about Barry Switzer last August and interviewed Barry from Midway Deli, which is his favorite place on earth, I'm pretty sure. He made a whole video at the beginning of the pandemic, hey, everybody, wear a mask so that we can all go eat at Midway Deli. And that was his pitch. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
I respect it. I can get behind this.
Yeah,
so.
No, and I can definitely relate to the Midway Deli thing. Last year's Texas OU game, getting there fairly early and seeing all the booths and everything, and thinking, oh, this would be really cool. I want to get a Fletcher's hot dog, or I want to get a funnel cake. And I was like, you know what? I bet they feed you up there. And they did. And it was wonderful. And afterwards, just being dog tired and then realizing you need to get tickets or tokens or something to even get the stuff at the fair. And I was like, no, I'm going to go home now. And that was after driving at like 3 a.m. just to get to the Dallas-Fort Worth area from Lawton for that game. So I was quite tired. And
sounds like we had a pretty similar OU Texas experience.
Right.
I covered a game in Owasso the night before, and I drove straight from Owasso to Dallas after that, covering the high school football game. And I think I got maybe 3 hours of sleep, covered OU Texas at 11 a.m. and then probably got done at work around 8 p.m.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't leave the state fair without having a Fletcher's corny dog. So me and Tyler Palmatier, we found a booth, and we found a coupon booth, and then went and got the corn dog. So it was that was a good time, man. And I'm sad that, I mean, it sounds like OU Texas is going to go on as planned this year, but I just have some reservations about whether or not it's actually going to happen. So,
well, and especially with there being no state fair, and it just, even if you have it at the Cotton Bowl, is it even really worth it? Is it? I mean, it's a different atmosphere altogether, man. And I will say that was a very unique. It was my first time going to Texas OU, and it's a unique atmosphere. I will say, if you're, it's not necessarily for neutrals per se, because if you don't like both schools, or if you're on the fence, you're just going to hear a lot of Boomer and Texas Fight being yelled every 2 minutes. And it is something that was very unique, and I will miss that about that. But I think that's all the time we have for today. But Joe, thank you so much for jumping on, and hopefully we will have a fall football season, and hopefully I will get to see you at some OU games this fall. And who knows, maybe I will be able to go up to Norman and grab some of that good food that you were talking about.
I hope so too, man. I'm looking forward to it, and as long as they say they're having a season, I'm going to look forward to it, and hopefully we can all be in a press box together soon. So.
Amen to that. All right. Well, for SpOKen Freely, I'm Glenn Brockenbush signing off.